Are you ready to bring your tabletop interiors to life? In this video, I'm showing you how to craft all the essential furniture your dungeons and taverns need. From beds and tables to wardrobes, cabinets, and even a cozy fireplace. Everything is made with simple materials like coffee stirrers, cardstock, and Jenga pieces. And I've also prepared free templates so you can follow along easily. Doesn't matter if you're building an inn, a wizard study, or a royal camber, this furniture will make your scenes feel detailed and alive. Welcome back to HANDCRAFTED. Today we're building essential miniature furniture for your D&D dungeons. Beds, chairs, tables, cabinets, shelves, a fireplace, everything you might need to bring your interiors to life. This time I was heavily inspired by Wylog's tutorial on dungeon furniture. It's one of those must-watch videos that really covers the whole topic. But now that I've built my modular magnetic dungeon system, I want to create new pieces to suit my own needs and style. This video is kind of a spiritual expansion of Wylog's guide. I've made sure that the designs are very different from his to give you more variety and ideas for your build. I also highly recommend watching his video too if you haven't already. The more perspectives, the better. So grab your tools and let's start! For the first furniture piece, we're going to use a wooden dowel as the base. I recommend using wood so the piece is stable and satisfying to put in the gaming board. Mark the size you want and cut it. Sand it down to remove splinters and smooth out the cut area. Then I'm going to use a half ice cream stick for the sides and a coffee stirrer to make a shelf. To make the back panel of the furniture, I will use XPS foam cut to size. We will cut it fairly thin with the Proxon, but not too thin so it doesn't end up flimsy. Next, we will texture it using our usual ballpoint pen and aluminum bristle brush technique. Time to assemble. Use hot glue to attach the foam panel to the wooden strip. Then glue the side pieces. Here I will use two types of glue, PVA for the wooden parts and hot glue for joining foam to wood. This way the bond will be stronger. Now we place the shelf using the same gluing method. To simulate drawers and cabinets, I've cut several cardstock pieces, which I will glue to the wood using PVA glue. For the knobs, I will look for some interestingly shaped beds in my bits box. I'm going to use these pieces as hinges. If you've seen my videos, you've probably seen me use them before. We split them in half and sand them carefully. Glue everything in place and let it dry with the piece facing up. And finally, I add some adhesive jewels to the side panels as extra details. Let's move on to the next one. We start by cutting some small pieces from the same wooden dowel as before. These will be nightstands or small dressers. We will decorate them using the same techniques as with the previous piece. Cut some cardstock into strips to create drawers, and glue them on with a bit of PVA glue. Then add some beds as drawer handles and that's it. Easy, right? So let's keep going. Now it's time for the tables. We've made tables before on the channel, so this time we will make them a bit different to add more variety. We will use coffee stirrers for the tabletops and a small wooden dowel, which we will cut to the right width with a handsaw. Then we will use cutting pliers to trim the coffee stirrers to size. To create a more interesting effect, we will slightly trim the edges with a blade. This is the same technique we use for the modular docks. I will leave the video here in case you want to check it out. We will also cut some cardstock into strips about 5 mm wide. Now, as you can see, I'm gluing the wooden slats with hot glue. But heads up, I end up removing them later because they were too short. Just glue a crossbar first. You will see that in a bit. We glue the cardstock strips to the top edge of the tabletop. Let them cool for a few seconds, fold them over and glue them underneath. This will help hold all the coffee stirrers together while also decorating the table. Later, I added extra coffee stirrers to the wooden dowels as fit. As I mentioned, we will detach this from the tabletop later, but those two pieces will stay connected. We will use adhesive jewels to add detail. Place them over the cardstock strips to simulate rivets. Alright, now I've removed the tabletops from the legs. They were too low, so I'm going to glue a strip of wood along the bottom and then attach the legs to that strip. This way, the table will have the right height. And with that, we're done with this piece until it's time to paint. Let's switch up the techniques a bit and use some foam, so you can see different alternatives and ways to make furniture. We've cut a small foam block and a couple of pieces. And now I'm trimming some cardstock to make the doors for what will be a wardrobe. First, let's add a bit of wood grain texture to the foam pieces. Now we will glue the foam pieces together using hot glue, pressing gently so they bond well. Then we will glue the doors in place using PVA glue. Let it then dry face up. I used too much glue, so I had to wipe off the excess with a bit of toilet paper. After marking the correct position, I'm going to use hinges like the ones we used earlier for decoration. I will be using these pieces several times, and they will help provide some cohesion across different furniture pieces. Finally, I'm going to use a couple of beds to simulate handles, gluing them with PVA glue just like we did with the hinges. And that's another piece done. If you're enjoying this project so far, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe for more modular builds, terrain ideas and crafting experiments. You can also support me on Patreon, where I post early looks, exclusive content and downloadable templates to help you build faster. Also, a huge thank you to all my patrons. You truly help make this channel possible. Let's keep going with the foam. We've made the same shape as before, but smaller, to create a dresser. Let's texture those pieces. Glue them together with hot glue and press firmly. Next, cut some cardstock strips to make the drawers. Glue all of them with PVA glue and use clips to ensure they align in the correct position. For the knobs, I'm going to use some small plastic beds. To make things easier, I poured some glue onto a piece of cardboard, so I can pick up the beds with tweezers and dip them into the glue comfortably. These pieces are made of foam and are super lightweight. Once everything is dry, we're going to use a couple of big screws to add some weight to the dresser and the wardrobe. This way, they will be more stable and feel nicer on the gaming table. So, another piece done. Let's see what we build next. A good interior needs a fireplace. Let's make one out of foam. Don't worry, I'm providing a free template for this piece on both Patreon and Discord. For the arch, I used an MDF ellipse I had on hand. Lower the temperature on the proxon and make the cut. If you don't have a piece like this, you can create a template with paper or cardboard. we will texture a small piece that will be the back panel. For the fireplace arch, we will cut it with a blade and then widen everything using a ballpoint pen. We will make a small base and texture it using foam rollers. Then we will finish texturing the main piece. If you don't have rollers, you can draw the texture by hand using the pen, or use a stone or a foil ball. Glue the arch to the back panel using hot glue. Press it well and wait a few seconds. Then glue this assembly to the base, centering and aligning with the back. I also cut out a piece to act as a wooden mantle. Texture it using the usual techniques. Glue it on with hot glue and finalize a few texture details. To hide the seams, I will use a bit of filler. As always, this is the cheapest kind from the dollar store, the typical one used for filling wall cracks or holes. Finally, to add some weight, we're going to make a few holes to insert metal washers. As you can see, I did this after priming, but I recommend doing it before. Add a bit of hot glue, place the washer, and now this piece has a great stability and a pleasant weight for gameplay. More furniture! This time we're going to use Jenga pieces, gluing a couple together with PVA glue and using clamps while they dry. We cut some cardstock to make a cover. By the way, I already made this type of piece in a very old short. We glue the pieces in place, covering the seams between the Jenga blocks and let them dry. For this, I placed a weight on top. Meanwhile, I cut out some cardstock doors. I made 3 for each furniture piece and carefully glued them on, making sure they are properly aligned. For decoration, I'm going to use these pieces from AliExpress, which I already used in the Fantasy House video, which I will link here. For the other piece, I will add hinges and beds like I've used on other builds. As I mentioned before, this brings cohesion to the set. Using these same techniques, I made a few extra pieces, including some with a single Jenga piece that I will later glue on top of a double one. I won't show the step-by-step process since these techniques are exactly the same. You will see each piece individually during the painting stage. I also cut some additional parts with the saw and added decoration using beds and adhesive jewels. I made another panel like the one from the first piece of furniture and started combining different parts. Here it's all about mixing and matching, assembling what you have in the way that seems most interesting to you. Once the joints had dried a bit, I attached the foam back panel to one of the furniture pieces using hot glue. Then I added some coffee stirrers to enhance the detail and cover some small imperfections. And with that, we've got a couple more pieces for our set. Now onto the final pieces, beds and then chairs. I saved these for the last because they were the ones I was least excited to make, but at the same time they are very necessary. I'm going with a very simple design using a piece of foam as the structural base. Then I cut an ice cream stick to size to serve as the headboard. After sanding it a bit, I used pliers to trim the corners. Next, we glue the piece to the foam base using hot glue. We will also take this chance to attach coffee stirrers to the other sides, creating a kind of a frame. Once that's done, we add matchsticks to the corners to serve as legs. At the headboard, we will let them stick out a bit more as a decorative detail, and at the foot of the bed just slightly. Trim the underside to size and that's it. We will make the bed sheets after painting. So now let's move on to the final pieces. We are almost there, let's finish up. We're going to make the chairs using balsa wood as the base material. Cut out rectangles and squares using a utility knife. Next, glue the squares, which will be the seats, to the rectangles, which will serve as the backrest and rear legs of the chairs. Use PVA glue for the joints and let them dry thoroughly. Meanwhile, I'm cutting some very thin XPS foam squares and some balsa wood strips. These will be cushions and front legs. Assemble everything using hot glue, although you can also use super glue with an accelerant for a stronger bond. I wanted a bit more shape and detail, so I trimmed a few corners with pliers. I made 8 chairs, so I will create 2 sets of 4 with some variations between them. As you can see, things are looking great, but I wanted to add a final detail to those chairs. I found some small beds that I liked as decorative ornaments, and I'm gluing them onto the back of the chairs. This is totally optional, but I think it adds a bit of extra detail and extra texture. Once this is dry, the construction phase will be complete, and we will be ready to prime all the pieces. Everything's looking pretty well. Now, it's time to start painting. Before we get into painting, don't forget to leave a comment down below with your ideas, suggestions, or just to say hi. I always love reading them. And of course, if you know someone who will love this project, share the video. For painting, we will mostly use varied wood tones, some lighter, some darker, in order to have a nice color variation. We will also use a few metallic accents for things like handles or ornaments. Once the pieces are fully painted, I will show you how to add details and tiny objects to breathe life into each piece. As always, we're going to start by applying a couple of coats of black acrylic paint mixed with PVA glue. This will reinforce the pieces and seal the foam parts. Once it dries, we will begin roughly painting all the wooden surfaces with dark brown. It doesn't need to be perfect, but try to cover most of the surface. In the case of the fireplace, we will apply a neutral grey overbrush to the stone parts, leaving the inside mostly black to recreate the effect of soot. Now let's paint the wood using the dry brush technique with a mid-tone brown. It's important to make the brush strokes perpendicular to the wood grain to get a better result. We will also do a light white dry brush over the fireplace tone. This will add depth and help enhance the texture of the piece even more. To add some variation, I decided to use a different shade of brown on some parts of the furniture. This will break the monotony a bit and help the pieces stand out more. Finally, we will finish the wood paint job with a super light dry brush across the whole surface using foam. This will unify the piece, blending the different tones we've used. It's important to emphasize the edges to create a greater sense of depth and three-dimensionality. For the metallic details, I'm using a mix of gunmetal and orange. I like doing it this way because it gives a more mute tone than using gold paint as a base. I think it's turning out great, making the elements stand out without being too over the top. Finally, we will also paint the cushioned parts of the chairs, one set in green and the other in red. When I applied the browns, I also paint over these parts, so they already have some shading. By applying the paint slightly diluted, we can preserve those shadows in the color we want, so there's no need to apply other tones to get a good result. Remember how in the previous video I collaborated with a 3D printing company? Well, if you didn't see it, I will leave the video here, where I built a huge dungeon. The thing is, I still have a lot of small details like bottles and baskets. I'm going to use them to decorate some of the furniture. After a coat of spray primer, I will start painting the different elements little by little. I'm going to use a simple color scheme, since I don't want to spend too much time on this, and I believe the visual impact lies in the overall scene rather than in these tiny individual elements. Digging through my bit box, I pick out several that I already used a while ago for the alchemy table. The process is very simple. You just need to fill them with hot glue and sand down any rough edges that might remain. I will also make another version by placing a much smaller bed on top as a stopper. After priming everything with black spray, we move on to painting. I choose to paint the ones without stoppers in gold using the dry brushing technique to highlight the textures. The others I painted in silver. Next, we paint the visible part of the hot glue at the top with various colors. My only requirement is that they be bright and saturated so they stand out. I painted all the stoppers brown, and with that, we are done. Alright, let's fill up the furniture. For me, definitely the most fun part of all. I have a box full of books I made a year ago. I made 200 of them all at once, so I'd never have to make more again. And I followed a tutorial by Willow. He's someone I reference often and he's been a huge influence on me. So if by any chance you're watching this video, thanks for all your videos, dude. As you can see, I've glued several of them together, and now I'm painting the top part white. I decided not to do this initially because I usually place them in ways where that part doesn't show, but that's not the case for today's project. We glue them to the furniture with PVA glue and that's it. We keep placing more elements, like the 3D printed bottles. Don't worry about the glue, it will dry clear. I'm also going to place the painted beds as containers, some baskets, and other items I had in my bits box. We will do the same with the other piece of furniture to fill up the central area. I'm really happy with how it turned out. Let's keep going with the rest. Now we will continue with the counters. I imagine them kind of like shop counters, so I'm going to glue on a scale, some tiny shears that gave me Skyrim Dwemer vibes, and a quill with an inkwell. I also printed some maps and documents. I will share a file I put together mixing maps I've drawn with documents I created in Illustrator, so you can print them at home. It will be available on Patreon and Discord. Now I'm going to make some thread spools by painting a few toothpicks brown. I wrap them with colored thread which I borrowed from my partner and seed them with a little PVA glue applied with a brush. Then we cut them, paint the cut ends and glue them wherever we want. In my case, onto the other counter, where I had already placed a few items. Great, now it's time for the tables. We're going to make some food and a few mugs. I won't go into too much detail here because I already covered all of this in the miniature market video, which you can watch here. The bread was made with white polymer clay and then given a brown wash. The small plate was a random plastic piece I had, no idea where it came from, and the mugs are bits with the perfect shape, just glue it in place as is. We're also going to make a plate of chicken legs, Wylock style again. They are made from plastic coated clips with a ball of hot glue on the end. We built a little pile on the plate and glue everything down on the second table. To finish the beds, I'm not going to complicate things. I will simply make a mattress using toilet paper. I will fold the sheet until it's the right size, then glue it with a couple of drops of hot glue to keep everything in place. I'm going to use watered down PVA glue to harden the paper and achieve the fabric effect I'm aiming for. Make sure to let this dry on a non-stick surface like baking paper or silicone. I used the backing paper from the adhesive vinyl tiles I used to make the city tiles, water tiles and cave tiles. I have tons of it and nothing sticks to it. Once it's dry, we paint the mattress in the desired color and let it dry. Finally, we glue it in place with a bit of hot glue and that's it, we have beds. By the way, I wanted to take a moment to show you the version Eric Bates made of the city tiles I shared on the channel a few months ago. I really like the paint job he gave it, and his version using only square tiles looks great. It makes me really happy to see people using my projects as inspiration, so if you've built something and you'd like me to showcase it on the channel, just reach out to me on Discord and send me over some photos. Also, a huge thank you to all my Patreon members for the support you give me, financially as well as through feedback, ideas and interaction. You are the best! Alright, the final step, creating a fire for the fireplace. For this, I will use the same technique I used for the fire on the spell markers. Video here if you are interested. Where I also made grease, ice walls, entanglement and a few other effects. Once the hot glue has cooled, we will paint it with a yellow base coat. Then, without letting it dry, we will paint the upper part red and blend it downward while still wet, creating an orange gradient in between. Once it's peeled off, we will trim it a bit with scissors, since some paint stuck to the flames and broke up the shape a little. I end up trimming the height so it will fit well inside the fireplace. Now it's just a matter of gluing the flames together in layers. At the end, I will reinforce the bottom part with a bit of extra hot glue, and once it cools, I will paint that part bright yellow. For the firewood, just use some toothpicks painted brown. By the way, this is basically what Wylock did in his tavern video. Cut them into small pieces and glue them onto a strip of hot glue. Then add a bit more hot glue and place the flames on top. Touch it up with a little more brown, and once it's dry, we can place it in the fireplace. I didn't glue it down since it stays in place well enough on its own, and this way I can have the fireplace on or off, which opens up interesting gameplay possibilities. Now it's time for the final reveal. And that's it! We now have a full set of modular dungeon furniture. It's been super satisfying to design these pieces with different techniques and approach. I hope having different stylistic options inspire you to mix, match and personalize your interior. I also hope you enjoyed this build as much as me. I love this kind of projects where I can build multiple small pieces with lots of tiny details. Now keep an eye on this channel, as for the next video I plan to build another big layout on the dining room to show my terrain together. Meanwhile, you can watch my full city playlist or maybe this other video. Anyways, thank you again for watching, and as always, keep crafting and I will see you in the next one.